Morning, everyone. Pastor Dan here from St Andrew's Church in Bundaberg, and this morning I want to tell you a little bit about my very short-lived career in Cub Scouts growing up. At the age of probably 10, my dad signed me up for Scouts, and it was something that I really liked the idea of. There was the camping and all the survival stuff and the activity kind of things, but my career was very short-lived. I never even got the full uniform. I think I only made it to 10 or so classes or weekly meetings, and I never made any of the camps. Because I always had sport. It was cricket and swimming in the summer and soccer in the winter, and I always prioritised those over Cubs. But what I wanted to tell you about Cubs was that even though I had such a short-lived career or experience with them, their motto today still rings in my mind. I can still remember so clearly what we would say. They call it their great howl that they have, because the whole scouting kind of movement is based on Rudyard Kipling's books of the Jungle Book, and so there's the names of the leaders are a Kayla and all these different things that are taken directly from the Jungle Book and the wolves and things like that. And the motto would go like this, or the great howl would go like this. We would all have to come and we would stand in this sort of giant kind of circle with the leaders sort of at the head of this horseshoe kind of circle, and all the boys would be there, and we would say our motto or our howl, and our motto would go like this. We would say, Akela, we'll do our best. Dib, 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 dob, dob, dob. And even though I had such a limited time with Scouts, I don't think I ever got any patches or honours or anything like that. That motto still rings strong in my head. Kayla, we'll do our best. Dib, 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 dob, dob, dob. And the dib, 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 dob, dob, dob seems a bit sort of weird, but the dib is actually DYB and the dob DOB, and the dib is do your best, do your best, do your best, and the dob is do our best, do our best, do our best. Be prepared, do your best, do our best. What great mottos to live by. The Cub Scouts movement has done some great things around the world, and we all have times when we need to do our best, when we need to work together to do our best, and when we need specifically to be prepared. One time that I was reminded about just this week with our Facebook memories was I was off in Camporee in Greater Sydney 11 years ago, and we realised that just like a day or two later we were going to find out that Jack was pregnant with our son Archie for the first time. In and around the craziness of having your first child, and the stress and the anxiety and the planning that goes into that, and the preparing that goes into that, into the buying all the cots and the strollers and the clothes and the nappies and the everything else that you can sort of imagine that goes along with that. We had some of our best friends put their wedding, or have their wedding, on the day after Archie was born. Archie was due to be born, and we said to our friends Richie and Beck, we said, look, really thank you so much for the invite, but we're probably not going to be able to make it when Archie's due to be born that day. Just give the seats to somebody else. But being such great friends that Richie and Beck said, no, we want you guys to come. If you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't. And so as the time got closer, we were preparing to have Archie. We were not really expecting to go. to the wedding. But then as we sort of got closer and closer, Archie wasn't here. It didn't look like he was sort of coming anytime sort of soon. And so we were like, okay, let's make this thing work. And so we lived up in Newcastle at the time, and the wedding was down in Sydney. And so we prepared our trip. And so, but to prepare our trip to go for this wedding, we mapped out where all the hospitals were along the way, all the way down that highway from Newcastle to Sydney. Where could we go to if we had to go? We looked at where the hospitals were in Hornsby and on the Central Coast, and we'd mapped them all out. And on the way sort of back again, we were set. If Archie was to come, we would be ready to go. We went to the wedding. We had a great time at our friend's wedding. We had a great time at the reception. We made our 2-hour journey home, and no Archie. Another day would go by. No Archie, another day. And it was about another 3 or 4 days later that Archie would finally make his entrance to the world. But we had to be prepared in that time. And we have this week with our Easter readings, we read chapter 21 of the book of Luke. And in that book, in that chapter, Jesus tells his people that they need to be prepared. They need to watch and wait. Of why Jesus is saying this in Luke 21, what has just sort of happened. We've seen that Jesus has had his triumphant entry where he's ridden on the donkey and he's come into the city, and the whole crowds are cheering. He's cleansed the temple. He's spending his days in the temple teaching the people, and then he spends his nights up in the hills to sort of recover. And during the days when he's down in the temple, we see that he has these conflicts with those the leaders around him. We see the Pharisees come and try and trick him. We see the Sadducees come and try and trick him. We have the lawyers sort of come in and try and trick him. They try to trick him up around taxes. They try and trick him up around death and resurrection and theology. They try and trip him up on money and all these different things. But Jesus stays strong, and he brings them his wisdom. And in this moment, he's acting as this role of sort of prophet. And then in Luke 21, he sort of foretells the just coming destruction of Jerusalem and what they need to watch for and what they need to be prepared for. And then in Luke 21, but finally in Luke 21 verses 34 to 36, he says this. He says, "But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth, but stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place, and to stand before the Son of Man." Jesus tells his followers that to be prepared means that we need to watch ourselves. And he gives 2 things that we need to be particularly concerned about in watching ourselves. The first one is frivolousness. He says, beware of the dissipation and that leads to drunkenness. He's saying to us that even though you may not drink, you may not be prone to anything like that, you may not have any sort of addictions, he's saying, watch out that you're not just living for now. Watch out that your concern isn't just about seeking your own joy. Watch out that your concern isn't just about what you have going on for you in this moment, that you're not just about living for yourself, that your focus isn't just on consumption of things to get you drunk, to distract you from what is really going on. The second thing Jesus warns his followers of that they need to be careful of when they're watching themselves is that they don't get weighed down by the cares of this life. by the worries of this life, by the anxieties that may be coming from isolation, by the anxieties that might be coming from finances, from the anxieties that might be coming from relationship breakdowns, whatever that worry may be. It could be exams, it could be tests, it could be struggles that you're going through, whether real or not. Jesus is telling us to watch ourselves, to not let these cares weigh us down, to not let these cares distract us from being prepared for him. So Jesus gives us these two areas that we need to be careful about, that we need to watch ourselves with. We need to be careful that we're not overly frivolous with our lives, that we're only concerned about what we do and what we have and where we are, that we're not just, our focus isn't just fixed on ourselves and what we have now. And he tells us that we need to also not be so worried and cautious and anxious about where we are in this world. The interesting thing about those two things is that they're both self-focused and they're both self-centered. The search for joy and the search for external sort of pleasure, and the search for worry and the anxiety and care is also like an inward focus thing as well. Jesus tells them to watch for these two things, but he also gives the antidote for these, the cure for these two things. He says to his followers to stay awake and pray always. So stay awake and pray always. You see, when we fix our hearts and our eyes on Jesus through prayer, when we seek God in these things, when we turn our hearts towards him, when we open ourselves up to hearing from him, when we challenge ourselves through the discipline of prayer, we remove our focus from ourselves to him. And by removing our focus from ourselves and our current situation to him, we'll be prepared for what's to come. So church, this morning, my challenge for you and my challenge for me and my challenge and hope for everyone that's listening is be prepared. And to be prepared, you need to be praying, you need to be seeking God, you need to be connecting with him in a way that is most beneficial and relevant to you. Are you the person that rolls out of bed in the morning and seeks God? Are you the person that prays late at night? Are you the person that sets aside some time at lunch? Whatever it is that you are doing, you need to be prepared and to be intentional about seeking him, so that our attention isn't on ourselves in either a frivolous nature and in either an overly cautious way. Be prepared. Pray so that you can stay awake. Have a great Easter, everyone, and hopefully I can see you all and catch up with you all soon.